Well, hello. Today I want to talk about MGTOW and how it affects our society currently and long term. I had started making observations many years ago to chronicle the decline and eventual collapse of this country. It is coming, and the signs are all there. How do I know that? Because in preparation for this, I had made a list of all the observations that I had made. And I thought, well, if I just get on there and give my opinion, that doesn't mean anything. So I Googled it. I said, what characteristics does the declining society all have in common throughout history? And I'm going to read you that list right now. Economic decline, political corruption, class conflict, no public morality, resource depletion, printing of money, rise of violence. Now, all declining and fallen societies have those in common, all the way back to biblical times. Now, let's talk about the list that I have made and the observations I've made and see if you agree. See if you've made these observations. The first one I have noticed is that God has been kicked out of everywhere. Starting in the 70s, we kicked God out of public schools. No prayer in public schools. And that fight went on and on for a long time until the liberals finally won. God was kicked out of all of the public buildings, and not just God, but anything slightly resembling a reference to God or anything of the Bible. The Ten Commandments were kicked out. Prayer was kicked out. You couldn't even talk about God on government grounds. Now, even if you're not a religious person, I want you to think about this. If you're going to kick God out of every place, why in the world would God come in and help and continue to bless this country? The biggest one that got my attention was the first Democratic National Convention that elected Barack Hussein Obama. There was a video, and I don't know if it's still around, but there was a video. They were wrapping up their articles or whatever it is they're called, and one of the speakers got up and said into the microphone to everybody in the auditorium, hey, we haven't mentioned God in this. What should we do? And everybody booed. God was not mentioned in Democratic National Convention papers from that year, and I would assume forward. The Democrats, the people who represent half of this country, kicked God out. Political corruption. Do I need to say much here? I mean, the last first family. They're called the Biden crime family. Where they tried to elect the conservative judges when the women came forward and lied about rape. They stole an election, a senatorial election up in Minnesota. All the corruption that went on during the election of Biden. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. There was another senator, conservative senator down in Louisiana, I think. Women came forward and lied on him, and he lost. Political corruption. It's here. It's huge. Legitimiquaz. LGBTQLMNOP. Now, whether you're religious or not, before I got saved, my opinion was this. What you do behind closed doors is none of my business. You do you, boo. Leave me the fuck alone. And I still believe that. But here's the problem. That biblically is immoral. It is a sin against God. It is a sin against humanity. But our government has legitimized it, made it legal. Not only made it legal, but made it a crime to discriminate against it. All of those, the legitimities. And in case you don't remember the list above, no public morality. That falls under no public morality. Another observation that I made was high debt. I can't even tell you how many trillions of dollars our country is in debt. And they just keep spending money like drunk sailors. Economic decline. Now, this country is so rich and so powerful and so resourceful that it'll drag on for a while. They'll be able to keep the ship afloat for a while. But you mark my words, this debt is going to come back to haunt somebody because nobody's giving a crap about getting it under control. Now, there is one political party that is great at revving up the economy and making things hum. But the problem with that is it does no good to increase income from taxes when you turn right around and take the money that the people have given you and you spend like a drunk sailor. If you are in debt in your family, you need to make more money and spend less money. That's not what the government's doing. Under one political party, revenues go up because the economy starts humming along, and it's getting ready to happen again. But the people in Congress are spending it faster than we can make it. Huge debt. And in case under that list, economic decline, it's happening. And just as a solid example of economic decline, how many cities do you know where their infrastructure is falling apart and they can't fix it? Or let's talk about the fires that are currently going on out in California. When the firefighters went to hook up to the water, they didn't have any water because the government wanted to save the resource. California, the 5th or 6th largest economy in the whole world, is having rolling blackouts because the government in California thinks, or says they think, that using the power that way is a waste of resources. No, what they're really doing is they're artificially making our resources go away, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. Another observation I made was I also noticed that our society has become very hedonistic. And related to the MGTOW movement, and I said this in the last video, these modern women, they feel entitled to have fun. It doesn't matter to anything about anything else. Let's have fun. And if we have to use men to get there, we'll do that. But I want to have high-class dinners, and I want gifts spent on me, and I want my bills paid, and I'm not going to make a commitment until I know this guy's loaded, and then I'm going to marry him, and in 2 years I'm going to divorce him and get the cash and prizes. That's hedonistic. And if you go back and you read history about a lot of the societies, they talk all about orgies, and by orgies I don't mean sexual. They probably were, but I mean orgies of just people just partying and getting drunk all the damn time. It's all about having fun. When this country was growing and producing, its people were working their tails off. Achieving something meant something. The goal of every female now is to be an influencer. Nobody wants to go be a nurse or a secretary or nobody wants that. I want to be an influencer. It's all about having fun. the rise of violence. The violence in this country is at an all-time high. The city that I live in has about 125,000 people in it, and we are the number one per capita crime city in the country. Unbelievable. And our police force is absolutely worthless. I don't think they've solved a homicide in 5 years. And speaking of homicides, we've had 3 times the number of homicides this year than we did last year. And by this year, I meant 2024. Now here's the big 3 that I want to hit that I have noticed have declined. And these all fall under resource depletion. And before I get there, let's talk about resource depletion. This country, like I said, is extremely wealthy. And we have at least 300 years of oil in this country. We are oil independent. We have about 500 years of coal in this country. But you know what the Democrats have done? They've all but gotten rid of the coal industry. And they use the guise of weather change and pollution. Do you think if we could invent the internet, we might be able to figure out a way to burn coal cleanly? But that's not what they want. They are depleting our resources for a purpose, because that's a characteristic of every declining society. So as soon as the previous administration came in, one of the first things he did was shut off that oil pipeline from Canada. No new oil leases. Now we were energy independent under the previous administration. And as soon as he came in, we depleted our reserves, and now we're ordering oil again from around the world. The Green New Deal. That is the dumbest idea, and that if that ever passes, that will be the decline of this country to the nth degree. But depletion of resources in this country and in this instance will be artificial, but it will happen. I want to talk about the social aspects that I have noticed. The 3 big ones that are easy to notice. Every country or every society that fails, their marriage rate declines. The marriage rate in this country, especially among Gen Zers, is almost non-existent. When I was growing up, men and women played a game. The men wanted to play the field, and the girls were trying to get them tied down to get married. That was the game. That was the society game that everybody played. Today, nobody wants to get married. Men don't want to get married because of their resources. They don't want to waste their resources. And I don't know why women don't want to get married. I guess they like playing the field. Because the ones that do want to get married are getting married for cash and prizes. I don't see very many marriages going around currently that have lasted very long. My son got married, had 2 kids with this woman, and 3 or 4 years after they got married, she divorced him on trumped up charges. And then her family had money, so they hired a high-class attorney, and he took my son to the cleaners. And when I say cleaners, oh my Lord, he got everything but the bathroom sink. Fortunately, my son is a smart man. He more than recovered. She went on to get another guy. He went on, he found another girl, no problem. but neither one of them were getting married. Marriage decline. And the ones that do get married, they don't last. Another characteristic of a declining society is the birth rate declines. In the 60s and 70s, everybody was having lots of damn kids. The Catholics had kids because they didn't believe in birth controls. The blacks were having kids just because they got more money from the government. Everybody was having kids. It was not uncommon to have 6, 7, 8 kids. In any stratus of class, low, middle, or high, it didn't matter. Everybody had kids. Today, fast forward, it is uncommon for people to have more than a couple of kids. And a lot of people don't want to have any kids. The only society, or the only class, or the only people in this country that are still having a lot of kids are non-whites. The whites are not having kids at all. Their birth rate is below 2, and I would imagine getting close to 1. And that's the whole society, the whole white race. Declining birth rates. Again, the non-whites do it as a rule so they can live off of the dole. Whites, as a general rule in this country, are raised to be independent, self-sufficient. The non-whites, as a general rule, are not. Now, there are exceptions. The Orientals, they are uber self-sufficient. But Middle Eastern, the blacks, if I can get it for free, I'm going to get it for free. All I got to do is have a couple little babies, and I get more food stamps? Absolutely. It's the way they're raised. And LBJ knew that back in the 60s, because when he passed the food stamps and all that, if you read his biography, he made a comment when he was talking about the blacks. He said, I'll have them voting Democrat for the rest of the country history. They will always vote Democrat because we're going to pay them to. He was right. 90% of them vote Democrat. And it's all because of the dole. Declining birth rates. The education decline. I've made numerous videos on the education of this country. In the 70s, when I went to college, I knew then that it was indoctrination. It was not education. And I was 18 at the time. And I saw it. I knew it. I went to a public college in Illinois. Then I got married, had some kids, sent them to school. Now I live in, I wouldn't say affluent, but I would say upper middle class town. And I purposely spent a lot of money to live in this particular neighborhood, and they bused my kid all the way to the bad part of town. I went to the first parent-teacher conference, and I walked in the building. They were neon colors, red, orange, green, all over the walls with graffiti. That was her last day. I took her out and put her in parochial, and from then on, all of my kids went to parochial school. Another thing that I noticed about the education system, and I remember in the 70s when Jimmy Carter made the made the Department of Education a national thing. And I remember thinking, even as a 17-year-old, I was thinking, wait a minute, don't we pay property taxes locally to pay for our schools? Why is my federal tax dollars going to education for the country? The education, and we pay, I don't know about you, but I pay a lot. The property taxes in this town are higher than they are in California. We are the highest in the country, including New York. Unbelievable. But they're getting grants. Now, under Obama, the reason became very clear why the Democrats had the Department of Education, because I can't remember what it was called, but he set forth a national agenda for education. He wanted them to teach a certain type, and the federal government paid the school districts to teach this curriculum, whatever it was. I can't remember the name of it. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, oh, buddy. Now, my daughter is a teacher, and they enforce this. And she lives in a red state. Now, they dropped it after a couple of years because they saw it was absolutely foolish. The math wasn't mathing. The English, they couldn't put together a cohesive thought. They couldn't speak. They couldn't enunciate. There's a reason that our education scores are one of the worst in the world. And we're the most affluent in the world. Make that make sense. It's very easy. The policies of the government in this country are doing everything except educating our people. I have been telling people for 20 years, if I had kids again, I would never send them to public schools or parochial, because the parochials are getting just as bad. Cancer spreads. I would homeschool. My kids would know history, they would know math, they would know how to write and read. The kids today can't. They even stopped teaching cursive writing in schools. And there's a reason for that. And in case you don't know the reason is because all of our national public papers, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, blah, 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 that's all written in cursive writing. If you can't read cursive writing, then you don't know what your rights are. And if you don't know what your rights are, they can take them away from you and you wouldn't even know it. Again, as I said in the previous video, on purpose, with purpose. The effect of MGTOW on our society is, and I always say this, follow the logic. If men and women are now, if men are not getting married, oh, speaking of marriage, another thing the government did to encourage or discourage families was something they called palimony. They turned it into common law marriage. So even if the man thought he was being slick by not marrying the girl, they had common law marriage, so she still got cash and prizes at the end. That was done by the government on purpose, with purpose. So, but let's follow the logic. If men are not getting married and they're protecting their assets, what does that leave for the females? They have to live on their own. Okay? So if they live on their own and the men aren't getting married, they're not having kids. Or they're having kids out of wedlock. Either way, the birth rate goes way down. So that means now the difference between men and women in the societal ebb and flow goes down. Now the exception to that rule, as I said earlier, is the non-whites. If you pair that with the economy declining, the lack of morals, political corruption, if you put all of that together, it makes perfect sense. There is a devious thing going on, and it's been going on since the 60s. And the goal is to break this country. And they're succeeding. They're following a game plan. You know, I talked in the last video about if we want to be fair, then let's go back to, you can't get divorced unless you have a reason, and you have to have proof. Otherwise, if you get a no-fault divorce, you don't get cash and prizes. Or, how about if you file for divorce, you don't get anything. And if you get remarried, it's nullified. If you don't have a job and you have kids, you don't get food stamps. You don't get welfare. If you get a job just long enough to collect unemployment, you don't get that either. No unemployment. Get a job, learn how to keep a job. If we get back to what built this country, self-determination, self-reliance, grit, hard work, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to raise a good family in a good place with good morals to lead a good life. Because right now, that ain't happening. The current generation, at both jobs, we put out things for jobs. We have 150 people apply online. We call them up, we set appointments. 30 appointments. You know how many show? 0. Because the only reason they're applying is so they can get and continue to get unemployment. The system's broken. And these reasons are the reason the system's broken. And unless we fix the laws, we are going to cease to exist as a country. I said in the earlier video, we are living under 1950s and 60s laws in the year 2024 when society has completely changed. Back then, women didn't work. They had lots of kids. That's not true today. Why are we having child support in today's economy? Why? The women make just as much as the men. Back when that law was made, women didn't make money. Why are we paying alimony? You have a job and you elect to get a divorce. Then you get the kids and no cash and prizes. Until we get back to that, this country is heading down a one-way street. And it's to hell. Now I want to read these again. Economic decline, political corruption, class conflict, which by the way, class conflict was almost gone in this country until the first election of Barack Hussein Obama when he started pitting blacks against whites. And we still have not recovered from that. Class conflict, no public morality, resource depletion, the printing of money, which by the way, I didn't touch too highly on that one, but I did in the last video. Inflation is on purpose. The definition of inflation is too much cash chasing too few products. If you have too much cash, where do you think the cash comes from? The government prints the money. So if they print too much money for the economy, they're doing that shit on purpose. And the reason they're doing that is because every time inflation hits, it hits the poorest the hardest. And the bottom of the middle class go to the poor. So every time we have inflation, the middle class gets lesser and lesser, and that's on purpose. And the rise of violence. That's about all. We'll see you.